What's up everyone, Scott the TroutHammer here. So I got an idea for a new series of videos I'm going to start doing for this channel. And it's all based around a question I get asked all the time, is what is my favorite lure? And I actually tell people all the time I really don't know how to answer that, but I've kind of figured out a way how, and I'm going to go one step further. Actually, to be exact, 4 steps further, because I'm going to show you my 5 favorite lures for different species. So I'm going to do a video for my favorite lures for bass, my favorite lures for crappie, my favorite lures for salmon, what have you. I'm going to start this first one with one species that I know quite a bit about, the trout. And I'm going to do this in the countdown fashion, so sort of like 5 to 1, my 5th favorite lure for trout, going up to my number 1 favorite lure for trout. Okay, my number 5 favorite lure for trout fishing is a 2-inch curly-tailed grub. Now I'm showing you 2 here because it really doesn't matter which color. You know, you can get like an orange or a champagne one like this one on top, or a chartreuse with blue flake like the one on the bottom. But the biggest thing with trout is they love to chase lures, and this is a lure that you move. So the 2-inch grub sort of works middle of the road in terms of size of fish you'll catch. It appeals to almost all sizes of rainbow trout, down to the little legal size fish you can catch, all the way up to bird trout, because you guys have seen I've caught bird trout on these. But the point is, you take that little jig head, so this is a 1/32 ounce jig head, and that's what I use for a 2-inch curly-tailed grub. If I go up to a 3-inch curly-tailed grub, I'll use a 1/16 ounce jig head, just a little bit heavier, but not too much heavier, because you don't want this thing to sink very much. You want this thing to be sort of steady, but it is a jig head, so if you're more patient, it does give you the opportunity to let it descend. But the whole point is this mimics a small fish. This mimics a minnow. This mimics something that trout, which a lot of people forget are predatory fish, do predate upon. They eat these things. My 2 favorite ways to retrieve a curly-tailed grub, one is really close to the surface, and I sort of jig it upward. Instead of like what you do with most jigs where you want it to like descend and you jig it back up and then descend, jig it back up, that's a downward jigging. This one is an upward jigging. You actually want to keep the focus on the lure ascending and then let it drop a little bit, then ascend and keep the focus on that for a little bit, then descend a little bit more, then back up. Reason being is little tiny fish, they're eating on the surface like that. They're going up to get the little tiny bugs that appear on the surface of the water, and predatory fish, they're already looking up to see little unsuspecting fish like that to be an easy meal. So where color actually matters, that's where during the spring, late spring, and summertime, you want to throw the chartreuse patterns, because a lot of minnows and a lot of juvenile fish are already colored that way. You want to throw the darker colors like the champagne one here, or something like this one with a darker body. You want to throw those in the late summer, fall time, because that's when the fish have matured. They've got a little color to them. A lot of that has to do with what the sun does to the fish during the sunnier seasons that we have around here. But also at nighttime, those darker colors are going to create a better profile that's easier for the fish to see. Okay, my number 4 favorite trout lure is a spinner, more specifically Panther Martin. They're my favorite in terms of spinners, the way you get to retrieve these things, and the way these things fly through the air. But you've heard me describe in many videos talking about spinners that the difference with the leaf on the spinner, the blade, is the deeper leaf actually works a lot better on a slower retrieve, and a shallow, thin leaf works a lot better on a faster retrieve. The Panther Martin spinner, this thing spins no matter what. This thing spins if you dead stick it, it just goes on a fall. This is just made to move. But just like the curly-tailed minnow, it's a moving bait. It's something trout love to chase, but something this does that the curly-tailed minnow doesn't do is that blade puts off a lot of vibration and a lot of flash. So it has something that catches the eye of the trout and something that the trout can feel in the water a lot more than a 2-inch curly-tailed grub. My favorite places to throw spinners are anywhere with a current. So if I'm fishing a river or if I'm fishing a creek mouth as it flows into a lake, that's where I'm going to pick up a spinner and throw that around. And I know I've said it in other videos, but I'll say it again here. The things that matter the most with your color of spinner, so the silver blades, those are the ones you're going to want to use in clear water and or sunny days, because that's how this thing's going to give out the flash. If it's dirty water and or a cloudy overcast day, that's where you want to throw the gold blade. That sort of duller color, it tends to give a better sight for the fish, something a lot easier for them to track if the water's dirty than the silver one. The gold one is still effective on sunny days, but if it's a sunny day, this is going to be just a little bit more effective, just slightly going to edge out the gold blade. And so here's the nice thing that spinners allow you to do. They allow you to trout fish at night. So a lot of lures and a lot of baits, they don't give a lot of vibration. During the nighttime hours when it's dark out, the fish are more going off of vibration than off of sight. So like during the day where you'd throw a lighter colored one, during the night, throw a dark one or all black one, because the vibration is what's going to catch the fish's attention, but that darker color is going to cast a silhouette instead of an actual image of something in the water. So during the nighttime hours, that's what the fish are going to see, is something that's just sort of breaking off the light that's around everywhere else. My number 3 favorite trout lure is a Kastmaster. So these things are unique. I can't really classify these as a spoon, though you find them in the same fishing area at a store as other spoons, but these things work completely different. So Kastmasters are actually a lot more naturally a jigging lure. This is something that you want to fish more toward the bottom and sort of a jig upward, let it fall, jig upward, let it fall, jig upward, let it fall. And the thing that I like about Kastmasters also specifically are its body shape is very aerodynamic. You can bomb these things out pretty far. A lot of times when you get to an area and you're trying to find where the trout are, the first thing I do is put on a Kastmaster, because that allows me to treat it like a search bait. Cast it as far as I can, make 100, 150 foot casts, and the weight allows me to fish a lot of different depths as I retrieve the lure back to me. So like I said, they're mostly designed for that jigging action, because I think they're really engineered to be a bottom fishing lure, but these things have this very interesting swimming action when you retrieve them, if you just put them on a steady retrieve like you would with a spinner or a spoon, and it sort of kicks back and forth. It looks like a fish swimming through the water. With it looking like a fish swimming through the water, that's why Kastmaster makes a lot of painted Kastmasters, so it already has the look of a fish like that if you're on that steady retrieve. And really, honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the Kastmaster or the pond that make them so effective together, but in little ponds, if they stock it with trout, a Kastmaster is going to be your best friend. They're just going to come flying out, hammer this thing. You're going to catch almost all your fish off of one of these. My number 2 favorite trout lure, and it'd be really remiss of me if I didn't include this in this list, is a Trout Magnet worm. Now these things are, to me, these are the Senkos of the panfish world. The Senko is probably the most generally useful bass catching lure. This is just that for panfish also, but specifically for trout. So these things are my favorite things to throw in a current, especially if I'm fishing a river, like when I fish a lot of the high mountain creeks around Oregon for trout, is because it looks like a little grub, a little worm that you just let hit the surface. Only fish with that jig head. That jig head's really light. It's like a 1/64th ounce jig head. So it's not going to get very deep in the current, but the fish already know that. They're looking up and they're looking in the direction of the current coming at them. They're waiting for little pieces of food like this to float on by. And it's really clear water also when you're fishing in a creek or a river. So they really don't even think. When they see anything shaped like this in the water, they go flying for it. But in lakes and ponds, this thing is also really super effective. You see me fish it a lot of times in videos where I put a crappie nibble on it and I treat it like a Senko. I just twitch, pause, twitch, pause. It's like a soft jerk bait more than a worm or a grub. But it's also a worm, it's also a grub. This thing does so much stuff. You really do yourself a favor if you go shopping for fishing supplies anywhere and you see Trout Magnet worms, and just buy a pack. It doesn't matter if you already have them, just buy more. You're going to go through those jig heads pretty quickly, but also they come in a multitude of colors. You know, there's chartreuse, white, red, green pumpkin, watermelon flake like in this one. But yeah, if there's any one lure that I stock up on the most for panfish, it's a Trout Magnet worm. And my number 1 favorite lure for trout fishing is a spoon. More specifically, a Thomas spoon. When it comes to trout fishing, this thing really is my confidence lure. It's one of the lures that I've been fishing the longest in my life, know how to work, and I mean, when the bite's on for trout and they're out feeding, you can't keep fish off your hook if you're throwing a Thomas spoon, at least in my experience. So the reason I prefer the Thomas spoon over the other spoons is these spoons have a lot more buoyant design, because they almost have this teardrop effect in the shape. So you can run these things like you would a regular spoon, where it spins on its own if you retrieve through the water. But this spoon, more than any other spoon, has an amazing action, an amazing unique action when you jig the spoon. So you sort of just let this spoon fall, and it sort of flutters down like this. Then you jig it up, and it sort of swims up like a fish trying to bring itself back to life, and then it sort of falls back down like that. And it's on that fall that I've seen fish just hammer this. And it's mostly because of that jigging action where it comes back up. It looks like it's a fish. Like I said, most of the lures I've shown you mimic small fish that trout will eat, but that looks like a dying fish, and it's on that fall. That's when the trout says, okay, there's my chance to get a meal. Chomp. But out of all my trout lures, I've caught the most trout off of Thomas spoons. I've caught the biggest trout off of Thomas spoons. The biggest one I throw is a 1/3 ounce. And this is a 1/4 ounce here, but I've got a lot of ones for smaller sizes, like I got 1/6 ounce Thomas spoons, all the way down to 1/8 ounce Thomas spoons. Definitely my biggest confidence lure for trout fishing, so if you ask me, that's my favorite trout lure. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Let me know what your favorite trout lures are. Let's start the conversation right here and now. If you guys like this video, and if you guys found this video helpful, if you guys learned something about trout fishing, please leave a like on your way out. And don't forget to subscribe to see more great content that's going to come from this channel. Thanks for hanging out with me, and as always, tips up, tight lines, and have fun fishing.